evening, everybody, and welcome to Fire Up Florida. Yes, you're hearing Fire Up Florida. We haven't had it in a while, but now we have a good reason to have it. We're going to be devoting this particular podcast to hockey, and there's no better person I can have than the man to the right of me. His name is Rod Pedersen. Rod, welcome to the broadcast.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I'm fired up, my man.
All right. Well, we are too. We're glad that you're a part of the team. So, Rod and I have been talking about this the last couple of weeks. And the main thing that we have been lacking a little bit is the opportunity to have a hockey show. So I've known that Fire Up Florida has been available, but I wasn't going to just put anything in there. I just wasn't going to do it. So when we talked a couple of weeks ago and decided this was the way to go, this was a no-brainer. Now, Rod, obviously, and his wife do the Cats and Bolts podcast. So, Rod, with that said, why don't you go ahead and let everybody know what the Cats and Bolts podcast consists of?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Scott. You said you were going to interview me, but I'm probably going to ask you a few questions here too, because you said you got Panther fan readers that are dying for coverage, right? And
Right.
and that's what led you to reach out a couple of weeks ago. And I think the first conversation we had, you're like, "Hey, I see you're at all the Panthers games and the Lightning. Do you want to team up and kind of handle that for us, right?" And I'm like, absolutely, because we're both Canadians living in South Florida. Just bought a house actually in Boca, and plan to be there forever, hopefully. And we're hockey people, and so I've been down there off and on for 3 years, and I was kind of surveying the situation. And I do a talk show in Canada, a television show, but my viewers didn't really care about the Panthers or the Lightning, and I found the Florida people didn't really care about Canadian sports, so I had to split them, and that's why I started the Cats and Bolts podcast last September. And fast forward to now, I can't tell you how many people said to me, "Did you ever pick a good time to start a podcast on the NHL, a Florida NHL podcast?" Obviously, with the Panthers coming off a Stanley Cup run and then the run this year to win it, it has worked out well. And I'm going to be honest, one thing you're going to learn about me, I'm an honest guy, I'm frank. And so when I reached out to the Panthers alum, like Peter Worrell, Ed Jovanovski, Bill Lindsay, Dale Talon, that gang, they were in immediately. Jeff Chikrin of formerly Bally Sports Florida, let's just say Panthers TV. Every one of them said, "We don't ever get interviewed. So
Right.
when and where do you want us?" So to be honest, that gave us a lot of legitimacy right out of the gate, having those Panthers guys on, you know, and they've become really good friends.
Well, let me tell you, if you want the biggest Panther fan on the planet, you got it with Joshua Dorr. When I told him about this show, I can't see between the phone because we weren't doing anything where you could see it, but I wouldn't be surprised if this guy was doing cartwheels. He's been on me for a while. I said, "Joshua, be patient, be patient. I'm working on it. I'm working on it." And Joshua just loves his Florida Panthers. And you know what? I'm glad that when I told him today, and by the way, Joshua, happy birthday, pal. Okay, from everybody here at South Florida Tribune. So happy birthday to this guy. Couldn't wait. Do a better thing to wish you a happy birthday with an actual Panthers broadcast as well. So you're going to most likely get familiar with Joshua Dorr because he will grill you like you wouldn't believe, this guy.
Bring it on.
So,
I love it. That's what I want. And that's the thing is with our show, both my television show in Canada and Cats and Bolts, we're very interactive with the fans. We want to make people feel part of it
mhm,
because they are part of it, you know. And I'll be honest, we're gonna jump around. I know you got 5 questions here or more to get to, but when the Panthers won the Stanley Cup and then had the parade, I had so many Panthers fans writing me again, "You got to come back," because I'm in Canada, as you know, broadcasting baseball for the summer, minor league baseball.
right.
And I was like, "Am I going to come back for this parade or not?" I'd like to be there, but it was like $1,700 airline tickets, and I'm like, you know what? I feel like this. I've only been in Florida for 3 years, full time 1 year. This parade and this celebration is for the 30-year Panthers fans in my mind. You have that
Right.
party, and then because that's a big group and they deserve it. And I didn't feel like tagging along. I didn't feel right, but I want to be here for the next 30 years, right?
Well,
Moving forward with the coverage.
Well, I hope you are. You and I are going to be tag team partners. You better stick around. I'll
Yeah,
keep you.
that's the plan.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you. I don't pick my partners just to put any clown on. I'm looking for really quality, strong people. By the way, you're welcome, Joshua. I am. I believe a lot of people will say, yeah, he's from Metro Detroit. He's from Detroit. Well, I'm born and raised with Gordie Howe. I mean, come on. Really can't hold Gordie Howe against anybody. But the reality is that Josh says he's a 26-year fan. I don't know how old he is, but he's at least 26 years tied to this organization. They've had a lot of ups and they've had a lot of downs. And at least this guy can say he's a Stanley Cup champion. But if it weren't for
Yeah.
High Zinga, you wouldn't even have a team here in the first place.
Oh, of course, absolutely. And these are the fun topics that we have on Cats and Bolts because when the Panthers won the Stanley Cup, I thought, I hope this takes the chip off the shoulder of Panthers fans because they had a chip on their shoulder for not being taken as a legitimate hockey market. They feel, in Canada, we feel that South Florida is. But that six fans thing, Scott, you hear it all the time. Even the Panthers themselves embraced it in the Stanley Cup run. I'm not sure the chip's gone off their shoulder yet. And I think it's funny because Joshua right and said, so are you a Cats or a Bolts fan? Can I say 50-50? And I'll tell you why. I was the play-by-play voice of a team in the Canadian Football League for 20 years and a hockey team in Canada for 20 years. I gave my heart and soul to those teams.
Yeah.
And I realized when I left those teams, it didn't matter. And I'm like, to the team. It did to the fans, but not to the team. And I'm like, I am not going to give my soul again. I'm down the middle. The Lightning have had a great run, which, by the way, we went to a game in February, I think, February 17th, I think. We went and watched the Panthers in Tampa. I don't know if you've been to Lightning games there, Scott, but we showed up, and I'm with Panthers fans, and they're looking around Tampa going, whoa, we got a ways to go. Panthers fans saying that to be considered a hockey town like Tampa. But it was going to take winning, and the team did that. And it looks like they're going to be good for a long time.
Well, let's face the reality. Steve Eiserman built what they had over in
Yes.
Tampa. And then, let's face it, Lightning did have a great run. Obviously, Steve Stamkos exited to go to Nashville. I think he'll do some good things up there. But, the biggest thing that South Florida is known for, and you know this, and everybody out there that does, is it's a win or else, or we don't support.
Yeah.
And hey, listen, maybe they're smarter than everybody in the country because you know what? Why waste your money on losing teams? But don't tell that to the people in the Midwest where, where I'm from or anywhere where there's cold weather. I mean, the reality of the situation, they don't have beaches like we have here where there's other choices to go anywhere.
Well,
so
the only thing I would say on that is the Dolphins are the exception that proves the rule because from what I've seen, they sell out every game. And they haven't. I'm just saying.
The Dolphins sell out every game. Let me tell you something. You know why they sell out every game? Because you got a lot of transplants going there. I mean, you can't sit there and
Doesn't
tell
matter
me
why. Doesn't matter. You said win or else. Dude,
right.
I'm singing from the same hymn book. I get it. But the Dolphins haven't won a Super Bowl since 1972, and they sell out every game. I get it. It's their team.
Well, let me tell you something. You know what's going to happen with me and you? I feel it. I really, really feel it. Okay. You got Don Cherry and Dave Hodges. Okay. So I don't know who Don Cherry is going to be with me and you, but I can tell you right now, folks, we're going to use some puns here. I'll be lightning because I'm always lightning anyways with Motor City Mad attached to the mouth. Okay. And this is what we're looking to do to our partnership. This will not be a boring show, and you and I, with all of our broadcast experience, will make darn sure of it.
If it was going to be boring, I don't want any part of it. And I knew, I knew it wasn't going to be boring with you. Do you think I didn't look you up? Are you kidding me? Give me a break, Scott. I knew it's going to be legit, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to be good. Or else, why do it?
Oh, I agree. I mean, the reality of the situation is for those of you in the media, the reality is I don't believe in putting my name on the show unless it's going to be fun, good, with a little bit of electricity. And when I started talking to you, I said, this guy is going to be good. Whether I got two people on this show for it, don't make any difference, okay? It will be lightning and not boring is what it will be. Yeah, Josh, you're right. 44-year media expert. It better be because I wrote this thing called a book, Lessons from the Microphone, which I know you'll get one of these days in the States.
Yeah.
But the reality of the whole situation is this: you have to listen to your audience. I know Tampa's a great sports town, and South Florida, yeah, it's always been known for a football town. It always has been. The Miami Hurricanes and the Miami
Sure.
Dolphins. But I mean, when I was living here in my first tenure, they only had the Dolphins, the Hurricanes, and the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, and that was it in high school football. So this area's come a long way. They built a
Well,
lot of new roads, and Alligator Alley was only 2 lanes. Now it's 75. I dare those alligators to go on 75 when I'm bolting 90 miles an hour. It won't
yeah.
be a fair fight for the alligators because we'll be going after their meat later.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that the Panthers have gotten very popular, sell out pretty much every game, as you say. It's because they're winning. There's no two ways about that.
Right.
But even late in the season, Scott, I won't say which newspaper because I don't want to make enemies, nor do you. But I was
Right.
looking for a story on the Panthers game from the night before
Mm-hmm.
in South Florida, and they didn't have it, and it was a big newspaper, and they had everything else behind high school sports. They didn't. I don't even know if they had a Panthers story. And when I first came down from Canada, I couldn't believe this was even a thing because Canadians, you're from Detroit area, right, Michigan.
Right.
It'd be very hard to believe the NHL isn't a way bigger deal here. It's
Well,
getting there.
yeah, well, it is, but let's face reality. The Panthers have done a really nice job the last couple of years, and again, I want to go one more few minutes on our partnership, and then we'll get to some of the heavy stuff.
Yeah.
The whole idea is, I'm expecting Rod and his group to add a dimension for something that we have, and that's provide us with the best hockey coverage we can, in addition to the guests I have. And in return, what Rod's going to do is we'll have a bigger platform where he could probably get out to another sport or two and be able to turn his into a South Florida type of thing instead of being limited to what it is. And that's where a lot of what we have will come into play. So I am confident that I found the right individual to be able to carry us through those particular goals. And you and I know we're going to be really good on the air. I don't just find anybody that I can pair up with. So Joshua has a question. Where in Canada are you?
At this particular moment, I am in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
Well, you're up there near the Rough Riders.
Yeah, 40 miles away. I was the voice of the Rough Riders for 20 years. Yeah. So,
So you
yeah.
don't have to answer this question, but I have a feeling, and if you want to defer, that's okay. My gut feeling is the paper that didn't come was probably the Palm Beach Post, right? Okay, won't answer it. You don't have to, but you not answering it means it's probably the Palm Beach Post. But and I'm kidding with you. Yeah, no, you gotta be lip tight. But it is what it is. I mean, let's face reality. Hockey here is finally. The Panthers have done a really, really good job with that new facility at War Memorial. They were in the ice den out in Coral Springs for a while. So, I've always thought that they were Broward County's team, anyways.
Well, and by the way, I want to say something. These Panthers fans are legit, and they want the coverage. It was one of the first things out of your mouth was that your readers that are Panthers fans want the coverage,
Right.
right? And you're busy doing Hurricanes, Marlins. I'm following what you're doing, and like you said, I'm at those games anyways. They when I first came down to South Florida, I thought the perception is that the fans don't even know there's a team, or they don't even know
Right.
what hockey is. And I get down there, I'm like, no, they know. They know. They haven't been going to the games because it hasn't been a good run until the
Oh,
love few years. And they've been out in the
right.
community. They've been doing everything right. And listen, we can get into it somewhere down the line how things changed because from what I've been told by my Panthers people is that Vincent Viola the owner sat down with his key people and said, what do I need to do to make this
Oh,
franchise legit? A hockey franchise and win and make this a hockey market. They said, open your wallet, pay for players. And
right.
that's when the money went to Barkov and Bobrovsky and acquired Matthew Tkachuk and gave him the money. You got to spend because apparently that had not been happening before. And look what you have and hire the right people. I mean, Bill Zito, he just had
Yeah.
a Stanley Cup today out on a boat. It was his day with the Stanley Cup. They've done everything right. And, they are a first-class organization. They've treated me great. They're a very easy team to cover. and be around. So I was very happy when they won the Stanley Cup. But it all begins and ends. I think you know this, Scott. You've been covering sports longer than I have. At the top.
Yeah, it does. Well, let's face the reality. I got spoiled with the Detroit Red Wings. All the Red Wings had their 11 Stanley Cups, and they had a run where they had 4 years. If it wasn't for the salary cap, they'd probably have 4 or 5, a couple more, because Mike Gillis wasn't afraid to spend the money at all. The reality,
Yeah.
but the biggest thing that Florida has going for them, and you just said it right there, is Bill Zito. This guy is Einstein behind in the front office. I don't care what anybody says. As long as you have a guy like Bill Zito calling the shots, this guy's going to make the right call. I mean, Viola finally has himself the right man in the GM chair. I don't know, you put all the players you want, but you got to have a general manager that makes bold moves and is able to find a way to make it happen. So, but yeah, they are excited. As Bo Crouch, thanks for joining us, Bo. Bo is out on inside the pigskin on Tuesday nights, but they're excited about having a team that they can be excited about. That's true. You know, Joshua, to answer your question, the Panthers organization has come a long way. They've had a lot of lean times. I think it started to turn around a little bit, though, when Joel Quenneville got hired as the coach. Excuse me. Unfortunately for him, he had to resign for, something I don't want to get into.
Yeah.
But then they were headed in the right direction with Brunette. And then when they brought that veteran presence in there with Paul Maurice, then you got a guy that knows how to talk to the media and find all kinds of different ways. So, but the guy, my all-time favorite Panther will always go down to me is Roberto Luongo.
Yeah. Well, I'm a goalie guy, was a goalie. So I know all about Bobby Lou, watched him in junior hockey. So I think there's only 2 goalies. He might be the only one that is the leader in wins with 2 franchises.
Yeah.
Vancouver and Florida. I was going to say Patrick Waugh, but I don't think he's Montreal's all-time leader in wins. So Bobby Lou might be the only goalie that leads 2 franchises in wins. That's not a bad record to have, and now he's got his Stanley Cup to go along with it. But back to what I love about America is there's got to be a winner, there's got to be a loser.
Right.
Canada, not so much. Everybody gets a trophy in Canada. I have a problem with that. But when the Panthers hired Paul Maurice, I had a lot of Panthers fans saying to me, "Who is this guy? He's never won anything." And I was like, well, no, but he is a winner. Give him a chance. They'd been the head coach of the Leafs and the Winnipeg Jets and the Carolina Hurricanes. I knew enough about Paul Maurice to know this was a good hire. But I get where the Panthers fans were coming from. He's never won a Stanley Cup. Why are we hiring this guy?
Oh, give me a break, man. The guy was buried up with the Winnipeg Jets. Who's going to win there?
I'm just telling you.
Well, so am I.
Yeah, what
Who's
they said
going to
to
win
me.
in Winnipeg?
Nobody can. And by the way,
exactly,
they're tying a can to Paul Maurice. They're blaming him now because I'm up in Canada. It's all I hear. I'm around the hockey people all the time. You know how much hockey means to the people here. Right. And I, without quoting anybody, but the Jets organization's blaming Paul Maurice for their problems now. And I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
You go ahead, because he's got the cup out on a boat right now. He's not thinking about you. But that's what you just, like, losing teams don't look in the mirror.
But yet, meanwhile, Paul Maurice took the high road, okay, and said, I hope the next team that wins the Stanley Cup is the Winnipeg Jets. Now, there's only one thing the Winnipeg Jets need to do. You know what that is? Get the old logo from the WHA now that the Arizona Coyotes are history instead of the gaudy one that they have now. We'll save that for another day, but that's what we need to do. All right, you know what? We're going to go to a station break, Candy. Evelyn, go ahead.
You are listening to the South Florida Tribune. If you see the red subscribe button, hit it, like us, share us all over the place. We published a book last year. It is called Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by none other than Scott, the Motor City Madmouth Morganroth. And the foreword was by George Eichhorn. There's all kinds of stories in there about Scott's 40 plus years in the media business. It is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, and Apple and Google Books. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Apple, iHeartRadio, Google, you name it, CastBox, Deezer, wherever. Monday nights we talk baseball, and tonight we have a special show, Fire Up Florida. And then Tuesday nights we talk football. Wednesday nights and Thursday nights, Sports Exchange and Fire Up, where we talk any sports or kind of anything goes. Typically, Wednesday night, Scott has a show on No Filter. It's going to be moved this week till Thursday night, but it is the Motor City Mad Mouse show where he does a one-on-one interview show. We also have a website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where you can see pictures that I take, the writings of Scott Morganroth. We also have press releases from the Panthers. We have press releases from Miami Dolphins, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Detroit Lions, and numerous of the South Florida college towns, including the Hurricanes, the Gators, the USF Bulls, and Florida Atlantic Owls. Back to you, Scott.
Well done, Candy. Also on Twitter /X at Tribune South gets it done. You can follow me there. Candy gave you the overview of what we're about. I do have an assignment for you, Rod. When you talk to Adeline Beanbeck, you can just tell her tonight when you came on that he's the biggest animal on the air, is what you can tell you. And I'll tell you what, he is louder than anybody that I've ever been. And when he does promote you guys, you're going to need earplugs if he gets too loud and he's out of control, which we don't really care anyways. That isn't a knock against Andy, okay? I'm just saying, she don't realize that if she ever sits down and listens to this bad boy with you and I, that woman will be replaying our shows. I can guarantee you that. What can I tell you?
Because it's going to be good. It is good. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about some moves that have occurred during the offseason. Brandon Montour goes to the Seattle Kraken. Some thoughts about that?
Listen, probably around mid-February when the Panthers re-signed Gustav Forsling to a long, lucrative contract, I had Cats fans that get into this salary cap stuff going on. There's not going to be room for Montour. There's guys want to get paid. And it went to the end. They didn't get an extension done with Montour during the season, and he signed somewhere else. Yeah. He's been a key part of this team for quite a while, quarterback of the power play. But I think he can be replaced. I mean, I was a little surprised, Scott, that there wasn't a more outpouring of emotion for the longer-term guys. A lot of guys left. Like Oliver Ekman-Larsson was only there for one season. He signed with the Leafs. Vladimir Tarasenko came at the trade deadline from Ottawa. They all did their job. Won a Stanley Cup, gone. Anthony Stolarz was the backup goaltender. He signed with the Leafs. You're asking me specifically about Montour.
Right.
Ryan Lomberg is another guy that most of my Panther fan friends, he was their favorite Panther, Ryan Lomberg. They all got paid elsewhere. Oh, there you go. There's Josh right there, Joshua. Montour got paid. So, honestly, won a Stanley Cup. See you later.
That's called GMTA, great minds think alike between you and Joshua Dorr. Well, one thing I can tell you, and Joshua would even admit it too, and everybody, I knew when the Florida Panthers got back to the Stanley Cup Finals, they were going to win. And you know why? I've dealt with this a lot during my time in the media. I have seen so many teams go to the finals, and when they lose it, they get angry. There's such a chip on their shoulder that they want it bad, and they were able to taste it. So when Florida made it, and I repeat, made it to the finals, I said this game they're going to run into a tough Edmonton team. Nobody worried about 3-0, 3-3, none of that business. I don't care about that. I said the Panthers will win it in 7, is what they did. And, I don't care how you get there as long as you hoist a Stanley Cup and that's it. But the reality is this. There's a history in pro sports that if you've lost the championship round and you get back to the second year, I like the odds of that team returning because they had that sense of hunger to get it right when they were so close to getting it.
Yes. However, I'm not an analytics guy, but I am a big history guy. So in 100+ years of National Hockey League playoff hockey, only 6 teams had gotten back. Only 6 teams. And it was the 84 Oilers, and I think it was the Pittsburgh Penguins. I can't remember the year. So it was out of 2 times in 100 years of NHL hockey have the Panthers are now the third to go to the Stanley Cup, lose, and come back the next year and win. They're the third team. So I get the hunger and I get all that.
Right.
The narrative, as you probably heard around South Florida, all of the last year was that if we were healthy, we would have beaten the Vegas Golden Knights. And I'm like, I don't know if I would go along with that. I don't know. But that's what the fans believe, so that's all that mattered. And then doesn't matter now. They got back to Edmonton, or got back to the final. It was against Edmonton. You can't tell me you weren't a little nervous on the Panthers' behalf going into Game 7, because Bill Lindsay came on the Cats and Bolts podcast, that is the most nervous he'd been in his life.
No
That they
kidding.
might lose that thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the bottom line is what the Panthers did do is they made a lot of Americans proud by keeping the Canadians out of the Stanley Cup Winners Circle. I think that drought dates back to 1993 when the Montreal Canadiens ended up hoisting the cup. Otherwise, the Canadian cities have been all shut out. So, I mean,
Yeah.
all of America was cheering for the Florida Panthers. Keep this thing in the States.
Well, to be honest, a lot of Canadians were too that don't like the Oilers. But it's one thing you
Yes.
should know. You asked me, and Joshua asked me who I cheer for. I'm literally 50-50, maybe 60-40 Panthers, but the Lightning have been really, really good to me too, like first
Right.
class. But my wife, died in the wool Oilers fan. It's in her
Right,
DNA.
wow.
And that's a bit of a thing with our viewers on Cats and Bolts, because they don't like that. And so she's the believer that Gary Bettman's the reason no Canadian teams won the Stanley Cup since 1993. You might be aware that in Canada they call it the Bettman curse. So I said to her
Really?
when this thing went to Game 7, I said to my wife, "What are you going to say if the Oilers win this thing? What are you going to say about Bettman then?" And she goes, "I don't even want to think about it. I didn't want to talk about it."
Well, I'll
Go
say
ahead.
one thing you had going for you in Tampa, though, and I could easily say this. When you get my book, you're going to see it anyway. They had one of the best PR guys ever. I worked with him with the Pistons, Bill Wickett.
Right.
Yeah, Bill's now with Nashville. I don't think he's in that role, but Bill Wickett's in it.
Brian Burns was the guy that I deal with the Lightning, and just first class. Which by the way, with this rivalry, it's funny because when we were leaving Tampa after Game 4, which the Panthers won, came home to win the series in the fifth game, Lightning fans were saying, "Hope the Panthers win. Good luck the rest of the way." And I'm like,
yeah,
that would not happen in Canada with any teams. It wouldn't happen with Flames Oilers fans, or let's say Canadians Maple Leafs fans. But I've said, and I don't think like Florida, to me, the Florida I live in, there's not a lot of hate. There's a lot of zen, good vibes. And I like that. I like it a lot.
Well, let me tell you, I was in Tampa a couple of years. The Lightning treated me great. I've never had an issue with the Lightning, so I rarely ever have problems with
so it'd be hard to hate. It'd be hard to hate them, but
the reason why what you're saying is pretty accurate is everybody became in a situation where they didn't want the Stanley Cup to leave Florida. This became a Florida thing is what it became. It really, really did. Keep it in Florida. Even if you're a Lightning fans, you have to bite your tongue and the Panthers win it.
But Scott, that's why I say to the Panthers fans, chill out on the chip on your shoulder, because it's they're calling it the state of hockey. Stanley Cup, right? The last 5 Stanley Cup finals have had a Florida team in it, and it's driving everybody else nuts. Everybody outside Florida, and especially Canada, enjoy that. Enjoy it. That's a hell of an accomplishment.
Well, Rod, think about it. 30 years ago, they didn't even have any teams here. All of a sudden, all yet we're known for what spring training and minor league baseball. I mean, geez, oh, Pete, let these people. I give them a lot of credit. I mean, the reality of the situation that you're talking about is, they'll chill out, but they're getting used to hockey. It's something they haven't had their entire lives, like you and I and a lot of people. George Eichhorn's another guy who, by the way, is going to be on with us in a future date, just so you know. And I have another guy named Mark Meriday who's going to join us as well. And so there you go. Get used to on your new teammates. So, no, I mean, that's a good point. Speaking of Eichhorn, who resides in Detroit, we'll go ahead and have a nice segue here to Vladimir Tarasenko. It seems like the Red Wings seem to raid the Panthers every year to get somebody. If it wasn't 2 goaltenders last year, although Alex Lyons is the one who obviously performed quite well, now you go out there and get Vladimir Tarasenko, albeit he was acquired for Ottawa. But, that was a good pickup for the Red Wings, and at least Tarasenko, who I think he won a Stanley Cup with St. Louis, didn't he, before? So this guy has some cup-savvy experience, and he'll be paired with Alex DeBrincat and Patrick Kane. So
you got to be careful with what you listen to or who you listen to, because like I don't know if I told you when we chatted on the phone, my dad was a scout in the National Hockey League for 26 years with Dallas.
Right.
And so, I'm amongst the hockey people all the time. And the book on Tarasenko was that he was lazy. And I saw him come through with Ottawa, and I'm like, yeah, I can see that. He's a little lazy. And then when the Panthers acquired him at the trade deadline, I called my friends in Ottawa, my hockey media friends, and said, what do you think about this guy? And they said, just give him a chance. Give him a chance. I was like, well, I'm going to give him a chance. What kind of scouting report do you have on him? And they said that he could try harder. So I really kept my eye on him down the stretch and then into the playoffs, and he performed. I don't know if he was trying to get paid. Looking at Joshua's comment here, don't think Tarasenko would wanted to leave, but the Panthers had no money for him. Nobody wants to leave. That's the thing. Is Dale Talon talked about it. Bill Zito's obviously talked about it. They want to make South Florida, a destination for players to come and win. Not come and retire. And
well, let's not kid ourselves. In Florida, there's no state income tax either, and the weather is good. I mean, that no state income tax, don't take that out to L.A. and in Canada and New York either.
But that was also the case when the team sucked.
Right.
So I hear this all the time. Again, amongst the hockey people. I just hosted a Hockey Hall of Fame induction dinner here Friday night. Corey Sarich went into the Hall of Fame that we were hosting. Former Tampa Bay Lightning, won the Stanley Cup. And all the hockey people were up in my face about the no state income tax and this and that.
Right.
And I'm like, if that was the case, then the Buccaneers, the Dolphins, the Dallas Cowboys, the Vegas Raiders, they should all have the best teams.
Right.
Because all the best, highest paid players would be flocking to these states, and they're not. So I don't know why that's a thing now.
Yeah, but when you're winning, that no state income tax situation is certainly it to me, it does carry a little bit more weight, because then you can take your cake and eat it too between the weather and the no state income tax. Think about this though, Rod. Okay, why would a guy like Klay Thompson leave Golden State to go to Dallas? First of all, he didn't want the drama of LA. Otherwise, he's going back in there. But now he has a chance to go to Dallas with the Mavericks, who did get to the finals. And he's still, there's no state. If you live in California, don't tell me that no state income tax doesn't carry some weight, because it does.
Oh, trust me. My only thing on that, I'm guessing Klay Thompson was like, been there, done that. They won their championships in Golden State. They're not on the rise. Right. They're on the fall, right? Guys still want to win.
Right.
They also want to get paid, but he'd already won. Because I think with Montour, probably wasn't a real hard decision for him to go to Seattle. $7 million. He wasn't getting that in Florida. Now, on the flip side, though, Sam Reinhart took less to stay in Florida, but I don't think that was the tax issue. I think Sam Reinhart really, really loves the Panthers organization. It shows.
Oh, there's no debate there. I mean, Sam Reinhart would have taken a discount to stay here, because
he did.
And Dick Vitale says you can't buy happiness. And,
nope.
And that's exactly where Sam Reinhart. So let's go back to Tarasenko. Okay, obviously got a ring here in Florida. What kind of a contribution you think he's going to make for the Detroit Red Wings?
Well, I've got a good friend, a talk host in Michigan named Lou Gamelin, who's a Wings guy like yourself. And I said, why did they miss the playoffs? Because I had them picked to make the playoffs this year, to make the jump. And he said, lack of goaltending.
Right.
He goes, how does Steve Yzerman not know? That was a glaring void. I guess he thought Alex Lyons was going to be that guy, but he wasn't in Florida. He was a backup in Florida. And you're making him the number one guy in Detroit. To be honest, everybody dumps on Dale Talon. And his regime was before I showed up in Florida. So I don't want to argue with anybody. But Dale Talon giving Sergei Bobrovsky $10.5 million looks pretty good now, doesn't it?
Right.
And he sure got flamed for it after the fact. And he's not with the team anymore. But I guess I was a goalie, so I get a little defensive on it. But with Tarasenko can score as many goals as you want. If you can't keep them out of your net, they're no further ahead. There'll be a hell of a line, Kane, DeBrincat, and Tarasenko. But I think we just saw with the Oilers, one line doesn't win you anything.
Yeah, I think the problem with Lions, he simply ran out of gas. He's not used to playing that many games. Detroit has a guy named Sebastian Cossa, who will probably be up in about a year or so, but they're trying to get through. Ville Husso, to me, has been hurt a lot, so you can't count on him. James Reimer, I don't know. I mean, he was your third goaltender. You see how quickly he was a one and done there. But you're right. Okay, the Florida Panthers, they have Spencer Knight, who you hope at some point will be able to come back to the NHL and make an impact. And I thought before he ran into some, mental health issues, that this guy was going to be, down the line another version of Roberto Luongo. I hate comparing goaltenders and eras, but Spencer Knight, to me, I still won't write this guy off. I won't. And hopefully, at some point or another, he will be
Yeah.
the starting goaltender when the time comes that Bobrovsky is ready to hang it up. Because now Bobrovsky's got that Stanley Cup ring, so he's done everything. Now, to me, Sergei Bobrovsky's on house money, on borrowed time, whatever. He can leave whatever the heck he wants when he's ready to call it a career.
Yeah, but he's raising a family in South Florida. I think he's got a couple more years with the Panthers, and God knows by then, is Spencer Knight even going to be content to wait? I mean, let's be honest.
All
I
right.
don't know if you know, I'm a mental health and addiction recovery coach, so I've been following that Spencer Knight story very closely. And
Okay.
sometimes a change of scenery is what's best for people. And Bob, by the way, as you know, didn't start in Florida. He started in Philly, went to Columbus, won a couple of Vezinas, ended up in Florida. The Spencer Knight's best years are clearly ahead of him,
Right.
but how long? I know how the Panthers fans love him. I watched the World Juniors when he backstopped the USA to the gold medal. I was there
Right.
in Edmonton, Canada, and he has the ability. It's a tough position to play, and the Panthers have been incredibly patient with him. I'd like to see him be the backup. But you mentioned before we even went to air, they signed Chris Dreger. Why do you
Right.
do
Well,
that? Why do you do that if you think Spencer Knight's ready? They must not think
well,
Spencer Knight's
well,
ready.
with you saying that, let's segue over to Chris Dreger. I'll tell you, no wonder we get a. You're already reading my mind. It's our first broadcast together. Seriously, good stuff, man. Great minds think alike. Not that. Although I have to tell you one thing, I bumped into Kenny Albert a couple weeks ago, and he knew the GMTA analogy. I couldn't put it past Kenny Albert. Okay, but what he didn't know was the SDP analogy. He said, "Never heard of that one. Slow down, think, proceed." I got you, Kenny. And he was just laughing and having a good time with it. All right, but now let's go ahead and segue to Chris Dreger. I believe he took the Seattle Top Farm Club to the finals, and now he made and the first pick ever of Seattle Kraken. Unfortunately, didn't work out. So let's talk about his return act, okay? And let's go to Walter Mitchell. Remember when Knight got drafted? It was a shock because he went so late. That's a good point, Walter. I like the way you do your research here. Back to Dreger, okay? He's back, and there was a time too when they needed him in the playoffs a few years ago when Quinville was coaching. How do you perceive Dreger's second coming with the Panthers turning out?
I think it'll turn out great. I mean, he went in the expansion draft to Seattle, right? I don't think the Panthers wanted to
Yeah, he
lose him in
did.
the first. They didn't want to lose him in the first place, and he didn't want to
Right.
leave in the first place. I look at it like the first chance he had to come back, he did. Right. So, and the Panthers have carried largely three goalies on their roster a lot the last couple of years. The third guy was Spencer Knight. He's been up and down from Charlotte. So I think Dreger will be the guy. They trust him. They obviously like him. I think it's seamless. You're asking me how I think it'll play out.
Yeah.
Bob's still going to play his 50 games at least, probably, or more. And Dreger's a very capable backup. To be honest, I was shocked that Stolarz left. However, he got $2.5 million from the Leafs per
Right.
season. He's for a backup. I mean, Toronto doing Toronto things. So I just think the Dreger move made a lot of sense. He wants to be there. They want him. Was an easy deal, I'm sure, to make.
Well, Toronto hasn't won a Stanley Cup since 1967. So, of the original six teams, they've had the biggest drought of any of them. I think bringing Chris Dreger is a way bigger upgrade than losing Stolarz to
Yep.
the Leafs, because obviously everybody knows that he can win playoff games. And if you could get him to pick up 30, 35 games, then Sergei Bobrovsky won't be so worn out by the time he gets to the playoffs. I
Yeah.
think that may be the one signing that Florida's made this summer that will be the biggest sleeper signing of the ones that they made. And let me reemphasize what I said: sleeper signing. We all know he's good, but if you're going to go out there and make improvements, or you need steady play, it's in the pipes. And that's what I think Chris Streeter is going to do for Florida this year.
Yeah. But I don't. it's a wonderful topic about where does Bob go from here. The house money thing. I agree. I agree with all of that. He's going to the Hall of Fame. He's solidified that
Right.
now. He has the resume, but being around him enough and watching him enough, he's not the kind of guy that's going to take his foot off the gas. He's not wired that way. He's too hard of a worker, too mentally strong. Now, I think you're going to see Bob play just as many games, but these are the games that can win you a pennant. Like, let's not forget, the Panthers did finish first in the Atlantic Division, which was a massive thing. You know,
Right.
they've had it, and Bob's going to want to do that again. You don't get tired of that stuff, right?
Yeah, but the one thing he's got going for him is he doesn't have that big gorilla hanging over his shoulder. You got that Stanley Cup in your pocket,
Yeah,
okay? Now I want another one instead of trying to get one. And Paul Maurice made an interesting statement where, geez, I'd like to get my name on one of these. We worked too hard to get it. So, but as far as Bobrovsky, yeah, I mean, there's no reason why he can't play a lot of games. I think the Panthers are trying to say Bob from himself. Okay, Bob, we'll let you play as often as you want, but you have a little bit of help this time. We need you for the postseason. And, especially in the last couple of years, this guy's played exceptional hockey when it matters, and that's in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
yeah. Well, I think that not to say the backup position is overrated, but I look
Right,
up at Tampa Bay with Vasilevsky, and who's his backup? Nobody
right,
really knows. I mean, because he
right.
plays every game. So now, when the guy gets a rest, you'd like to win those games. Stolarz didn't blow it. He was decent. And that's what I think Dreger will be called upon. He's not going to be called upon to get him into the playoffs. That's Bob's job, right?
Well, of course not. No, I agree with you. There's no way he's going to. Drieger's your savior. All I'm saying is you feel safe with Drieger is what you do.
Yeah,
And it's not like you don't have game film on the guy either.
yeah,
You know what he can do. You're not looking for, I wonder what this guy can do. Well, we already know what he can do. Okay. What ended up happening is he got buried in that goaltender situation in Seattle, which brought him back down 3,000 miles here to southern Florida. I mean, let's face reality. When Roberto Luongo was playing for the Vancouver Canucks, nobody knew about him out west anyway because he's buried all the way on the other side of the world. But
yeah,
everybody,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, but
You
now that he's back in Florida, they all know who he is.
you want to talk about a fan base with a chip on their shoulder? It's Vancouver, and
Yeah,
they've never won a Stanley Cup. You talk about the Leafs not winning since '67. Vancouver never has. So I say this again for the Panthers fans. It's cool, man. React how you want to react. But you have left that group of teams that have never won. You are into the group of teams that
oh yeah,
have.
yeah,
That's
that's
pretty
true.
cool. That's cool.
But what I'm going to do is on a future show, I'm going to go over some of those teams that haven't won. But I do know is that the Buffalo Sabres and the Vancouver Canucks entered the league in 1970. So they're the oldest teams that have not won a Stanley Cup. And I really truly thought the Vancouver Canucks had a great shot to get to the Stanley Cup finals this year. It just didn't work out for the Canucks. And I've actually seen a game many, many years ago with the old Pacific Coliseum against a Canadian team. And I'm going to tell you, those are some good fans up in Vancouver. They really, really are. So one more thing we're going to talk about tonight. Just Fire Up Florida. My name is Scott Morgan of Motor City Madmouth. We're talking with the man in charge of the Cats and Bolts podcast, who's bringing his expertise to our network. His name is Rod Pedersen, and I'm going to tell you, this guy, to me, we're hoping to get him involved with the FAU Owls as well as some other teams as well. I expect this to be a great relationship, as I mentioned, for those of you that are just joining us, where, we'll be able to do a lot more with the Florida Panthers, and we'll be able to help Rod with some of the other teams that he hadn't been able to, and he'll represent us for other sports that he's not completely connected to. So with that said, okay, we're going to end it on this overview for the Panthers offseason. If you had to give it a grade up to this point, give me a grade, Rod.
Well, I don't know, B minus maybe. They haven't really stopped partying yet, have they? I've still seen all these videos of them going nuts, which they should. I
Right.
look at the free agency. We've covered them. It wasn't as splashy as last year. It wasn't. And that's fine. They're coming off a Stanley Cup champ. What did they have to do? They re-signed Sam Reinhart. That was huge. They lost Brandon Montour. That's a big hole. That's a big hole
Right.
in the blue line.
Yeah.
They lost Oliver Ekman-Larsson. They've got some holes that come training camp, there's going to be some open spots for a Stanley Cup winning team coming back. There's more holes than you'd like.
Right.
Right. You've kept some guys happy financially, but are they coming back as the favorites in the Atlantic Division? Probably not. Probably not. So I'll give them a B minus. How about that?
No, I think that's a fair grade. The bottom line is if you're winning a Stanley Cup or you won multiple, think about it, Pittsburgh Penguins haven't been there in a couple of years either. So ultimately your older players get older and you have to bring in new blood. But more importantly, when you win a Stanley Cup, you can have all the pictures with Lord Stanley all you want. But guess what? It gets expensive to continue to do it. And I will say this, because I know in my mind that the NHL salary cap is way lower than the other three pro sports. The NFL, MLB, which doesn't even have one, and the NBA, their hard cap is like not having one. So hockey in that situation, to me, is the fourth on that totem pole, and it's going to be harder to retain your players. So, but again, I'm going to reiterate what you said. The Panthers got the gorilla off their back. They don't have to worry about not ever winning one. I think the Toronto Maple Leafs have more pressure on them to not win one. How many coaches have they gone through the last several years to not get there?
Exponentially more pressure, and don't think that's not a factor. Paul Maurice can go through Fort Lauderdale, not unharassed, but he can't even move in a Canadian city. He can't. He can breathe. It makes a difference, and it's fun times to be a Panther fan.
Yeah, you ever been to Toronto?
Many times.
Yeah, I was there just recently. I'm going to tell you one thing. I felt like I was in a sardine can there. There's a lot of people in that sardine can. I don't mean it in a bad way. When I was out there recently covering the Blue Jays and the Kansas City Royals, I went out to the old Maple Leaf Gardens. And what a job they've done to rehabilitate that joint. But, it is a little bit congested over there. It really, really is. But Maple Leaf Gardens, if you've never even been there, they did a good job and kept the character of the building there. But I'm going to tell you one thing. It's the largest media market in Canada. And I'll tell you one thing. I view the Toronto Maple Leafs media market equivalent to New York or L.A.
It is. And they will tell you it's not just number one in Canada. It's like sixth in North America. It's a monster.
Right.
And I'll say this just for the people that are just getting to know me on your show. Toronto is not for me. And a good friend of mine, I sent him a picture from our neighborhood in South Florida where we live in Boca. And he goes, well, what do you say? To each their own. I'm like, how could you not think this isn't the greatest place in the world? Because that's what I think South Florida is. I guess it's not for everybody, but it's for us. We love it. Absolutely love it. We're so happy to be part of this. And I'm so happy that you reached out and want to be here for a good long time.
Oh, I'm enjoying it. Oh, I tell you one thing. I'll sweat more calories off on your show than I do with the other ones. And just think, we had 3 or 4 people on here. I can't afford to schedule much behind it because I know what's going to happen here. We may have to schedule these things for 7:30 to allow the extra time. But no, I mean, hey, listen, I love Toronto. Don't get me wrong. I was nice. I got to drive through Chinatown, and I said drive, not walk.
I'm just saying. I wouldn't want to live there. Nice to visit. Wouldn't want to live there.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, wasn't bad to go to Niagara Falls either, which is about an hour away. But yeah, I drove through Italy Town. I know that area well. Everybody will say to me, my late mother always used to say to me, I don't know how you got a good sense of direction, but before there were GPSs, she called me and put me on speed dial as you ain't getting off the phone until I know where the heck you're at. But I had no problem in Toronto. I mean, the reality of the situation is when I was in Toronto, I drove through Italy Town, Chinatown, and I drove to lots of places that I knew because of familiarity. And prior to that, I went on the subway and can't miss to see in town. No, it's going to be a blast. I mean, come on, seriously. I've always been a hockey person. How can you not when you've grown up in the original 6 town? Now, the only reason I even bothered to watch the Stanley Cup Finals this year was Florida was in it. Otherwise, I'm so busy with my broadcast schedule, my writing, and all the other things I do. And now that I'm in the book business, so if the Panthers weren't on, I wasn't watching the finals. And I'm being frankly honest with you. I had a local vested interest to at least pay attention to what's going on locally. Otherwise, I have to keep my responsibility to the Tribune and make sure every aspect of this is growing from the written side as well as the broadcast side and making sure that I can continue to find the right talent to continue to see this thing grow. And that's what I do. I've always been a firm believer that it's our goal to cover teams, providing they give you enough access as possible. But my goal is making sure that we as an organization win. And if we as an organization win, okay, then the organization that we're covering wins as well by reaching more people. Does that make sense?
That's what I think. That's
Well,
what I think. Yeah.
great minds think alike there. So, anyways, folks, it's the Fire Up Florida. Guess what? You'll be seeing more of these on Monday night. My co-host is Rod Pedersen. This guy is AWESOME. So awesome. Okay, I have to
Thank you,
save my
buddy.
voice. I have to go out there and do another show afterwards. But maybe we're going to bring Candy on one more station break, and then after we're done here with the station break, you're going to let everybody know, Rod, how they can get a hold of you. So hang with us. We need you for another few more minutes. All right.
You're good.
All right. Go ahead, Candace.
This show is sponsored by the South Florida Tribune Publishing Company, which published a book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It was written by none other than Scott Motor City Madmouth Morganroth. It is available on Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble. It talks about Scott's stories of his 40-plus years in the media business, how media has changed old school to new school media. Our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. You can see Scott's writings, my writings, and all kinds of South Florida news and sports teams and other people's writings. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, Google, Apple, Spotify, CastBox, Deezer, you name it, we're there. Monday nights, we typically talk baseball, and now hockey on Fire Up. Tuesday nights is Inside the Pigskin for football talk. Wednesday nights is Sports Exchange. Thursday nights is Fire Up. You never know what we're talking about on those two. We've talked from everything from cornhole to hot dog eating contest to NFL, NBA, and MLB. You name it, we cover it. We also Twitter at Tribune South. Our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. If you have ideas for show, email us, southfloridatribune@gmail.com. If you'd like to advertise or sponsor a show, call Scott, 954-304-4941. If you missed any of that during the program, you can either rewind if you're listening to us, and if you're watching us, it's scrolling on the bottom throughout the show. Back to you, Scott.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, Rod, great first act, but people, we're just getting warmed up with Rod and I, man. Dave Hodges and Don Cherry, move over. You got Scott and Rod. Okay. Now I got to ask you, Rod, were you named after the great Rod Gilbert?
The Great Buffalo Saber. No, I was not. Not that I know of. My parents aren't around to ask them, but good question.
Yeah, well, he had a rod on there, and he got a motor. So, usually you find rods and motors on vehicles, and that's why we have the Motor City Madmouth associated with cars. And if everybody thinks I'm delirious, they probably are right, because I don't really, frankly, care. And if we can come up with one-liners, then we're going to do exactly that. But the one thing that will not be a one-liner is me asking you how you can let everybody get a hold of you, Mr. Rod Pedersen.
You're looking at my name right there, at Rod Pedersen on Twitter. Give me a follow there, and our pod from there. All our links are on there. But at Cats and Bolts Pod on Twitter and Instagram, that's where you get all your Florida NHL coverage. I appreciate the opportunity, man. I had probably more fun than you did here over the last 53 minutes.
Well, I'm glad you did, but you know what, Rod? All I can say is, brother, you ain't seen nothing yet. We're just getting started. All you got to do is review this tape here and realize, oh, Nelly, when does he get started early? And you know what? Like I said, we're going to have to probably move this show up as we add more and more people to it. But I felt it was necessary for you and I to do the first one because we want to make people know out there, Panther fans and hockey fans, that we're setting the standard that anything Rod and I touch, there's no way we're going to lose. And I hate losing. I really do. And now that I got a good teammate here on the hockey front, as well as somebody that's going to work with my publication and do it right, the whole idea is my goal here, adding you into the program, is you and I will make a dynamite 1-2 punch, hopefully covering the Florida Panthers together. And then whether you're there, I'm there, or both of us, it doesn't matter. I think the one thing we're able to do, regardless of how that turns out, is we're going to give the Panther fans down here an opportunity to get some good, strong quality information. let's go to Anna Blue's team before we call it a night. Let's go Panthers. I've been a Panthers fan for 20 years. Congratulations on the cup, Mr. Adam Bloomstein. And more importantly, thank you very much for being on the broadcast. So, so however it works out, it works out. This show will be aired every Monday night, except when I'm out of town. So we feel like this will be a great lead-in show towards baseball, and that's what I'm confident. So Adam Bloomstein, I hope Scott can work something out with the Panthers PR department to cover some games this year. You know what, Adam? I hope so too. I really do. I'd like to get back out to what is it, Marant Arena. To me, it's been called a lot, but I will say one thing: when I have been in there, that's one of the best arenas that I've been to in the country. They did a great job on that building. They really, really did. I enjoyed that arena, and I will put that up in my top 10 or 15 list if I have to come up with one. And that's a great building for hockey. So we'll see. Hopefully it works out, Anna. But meanwhile, I'm glad my new teammate Rod and I will be able to go out there and make sure we bring the Panthers coverage a little bit closer. And that's why I brought out Fire Up Florida and gave Fire Up Florida the exclusive show for hockey and the Florida Panthers and Tampa Bay Lightning. And we will also be making it a show that talks about top NHL news, not limited to 2 or 3 teams, because we want to make sure you get the entire NHL flavor. So this is our first act, but you always look at your first act and said, all right, what are we going to do? And I have Rod here who's excited. Well, mark my word, I'm extremely excited to work with a guy like this. So
glad to be on the team, buddy. Okay, good luck with the baseball show.
All right, so on behalf of Rod Pedersen, my name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Fire Up, and we will catch you next week at around 7:30, 7:45 Eastern time. Good night, everybody.